July, July, I don't wanna die. Hello everybody, it's your boy the Critic, and I got all kinds of films to talk to you about this month. There's animation, then a whole lot of rewatches, and then Olympic films. Really just a series of themes that I failed to hold on to for more than a week. So let me show you guys. Belladonna of Sadness. It's a 1973 film by Eiichi Yamamoto. An adult folktale, awash with psychosexual psychedelia, Belladonna is told through an array of watercolor paintings, which either scroll by or are animated to life, creating enchantment and reverence in this medieval tale of sex, sin, and violence. As we enter a time when church, military, and state were doing their thing, subjugating and controlling people through sex, and the devil existed as a real threat against moral liberation. A lot's left up to the audience in parsing the two, but of course if I were to sell you this film on anything, it would be the style in which it is all presented, which is a summer of love soaked 60s and 70s trip with gorgeous animation, bridging these two disparate time periods while reflecting on the evolution of feminist freedom. The soundtrack has that classic Japanese cinema style of Lady Snowblood or Kill Bill, that whole woman's revenge genre. And like I said, the film is pretty mature, so I'm not afraid to display some triggering content. This woman really does earn her name with the punishment she goes through. The film suffers from being a little too simple, and blurring the line between being feminist and fetishizing this figure of the Belladonna. But this is a wholly unique, spellbinding vision, and if you're a fan of Japanese animation, a must-watch. I'm giving Belladonna of Sadness 8 out of 10. Silence of the Lambs, a 1991 film by Jonathan Demme. A theatrical Hollywood horror, which is to say it stops itself from being too disturbing or serious. But in place of that, we get a lot more room for fun, spooky horror vibes. Still, for me, it loses impact in the crossfire of these two approaches. I mean, there's a black bestie who shows up in a graduation scene in picture-perfect satire, except somehow with no self-awareness for a production this talented. And since I'm talking about this movie, you know what? I gotta give my take on the dance scene. You know the one. Now, in my opinion, the presentation of Buffalo Bill is in fact in conflict with the script's absolving itself of transphobia. I know it's difficult and even a little bit silly to describe your interpretation based on the highly technical and specific details of editing, but if you can rewatch that scene and tell me, based on the flow of it, what's presented is the most gross thing about it, more than the glam cross-dressing or even the whole skinning women thing, I'd argue that it's exactly what you think. But with those Hollywoodisms out of the way, the rest of what I gotta say are all positives. Anthony Hopkins kills it as Hannibal Lecter, a character who despite all the pop culture was still exciting and fresh to watch. He's fearsome, but in our case, because it's Jodie Foster's story, an ally and even a mentor. He may eat people, but he's a consummate gentleman. The relationship he forms with Jodie Foster really centers the story. I'm glad I watched it. It's clearly a horror classic for a reason. It's a Halloween season horror with frights, action, and drama for the whole family. Okay, maybe not the kids. Don't show this to kids. A man flings his sperm at a woman. And I'm giving Silence of the Lambs a 9 out of 10. Mind Game, Masaki Yuasa's 2004 feature film. So yeah, what in the fuck? It's every frame is a joy. The plot itself literally taking a back seat at certain points, so the movie can frolic in its own artistic expression. It captures coming of age with an earnestness that's only really normalized in Japanese media. You get a lot of manga and anime from artists who are still young adults and struggling to make sense of that distinction between childhood and who they are now. And it's something you can feel. It's self-reflective, showing immaturity, pervert tendencies, solipsism, and uncomfortable feelings in its protagonist. And in Mind Game, these traits not only define the characters, but the plot and world surrounding them. Yuasa is showing you who he is, and sidestepping the intense awkwardness of doing so by having a lot of fun doing it. Hopefully you can too. It's a movie so nice, I saw it twice this month. The second time I loved it even more. There are some confusing elements at the start and end that were clearer on the second watch, but also it just solidified how much fun every frame of this movie is. Just the visual gags, because of the way things are animated and performed, are just so entertaining, even on a rewatch. So you know it's not just the shock and novelty of it. It really is wacky and hilarious and absurd in all the best ways. Giving Mind Game a solid 9 out of 10. Next, we got a stop-motion animated film called A Town Called Panic. This was made in 2009 by directors Stephanie Aubier and Vincent Pettar. It's a wacky oddball cornball sandbox. Anything goes in this whimsical, hyper comedy based on a Belgian TV series. The only plot surrounding the three primary characters, cowboy, Indian, and horse, in a typical day. And it's not my kind of humor. The stop-motion animation allows a lot of visual gags and is consistently impressive, but most of the dialogue is delivered in that fake, naggy, screaming voice that to me is always just annoying more than funny. And I mean, my favorite character was Horace, and he's kind of like the straight man who talks pretty normally. I like when things get really absurd and surreal, but for the most part the humor is sitcom level or character based, but I don't really know these characters, so I'm just going along with this movie as it flows into this childlike momentum of what'll happen next. But seeing it as a standalone movie, I'd have preferred a story to exist. It was cute but unengaging, witty and admirable but not laugh out loud or anything. I know a lot of people love this movie, and if it looks like it's up your alley, check it out. So I'll throw it a 6 out of 10. Possession, a 1981 Andrei Zulawski joint. This is one of those forever watch list kind of films. It's a legendary cult horror, and a movie that's been on my radar for years. And well, this one will now haunt my dreams forever. You know, most art says things. This film is like a scream. A tiny, insignificant creature's howl into the void, with the faint hope that if there is a God, the sound will reach through the cold, blank expanse of our universe and fall upon his ears. So yeah, I liked it. Let me start by saying that horror is like my hometown of genre film. Ever since I was a little boy sneaking peeks at my parents watching the R-rated films on the TV. Then using the unguardioned internet to watch all of the old franchises, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Scream, movie death compilations on YouTube, just everything that you knew as a kid you were not supposed to watch. Yeah, maybe that had some kind of effect on me. And I've been aware that, unfortunately, as my film count has risen, my highest rated horrors are less horror than disturbing movies, like art house type films that could play with and subvert the genre, but can't be said to owe their power to the staples of it, nor call themselves horror in that way that makes it part of the family. But Possession manages to not just fuse art house and horror, but make that horror a fully grafted component. It shows that the gore and even schlock of the genre is a unique ingredient with the full potential to enhance complex, penetrative art with great writing and characters to leverage it into something truly horrifying. So, finally, since The Shining, and if you'll count on Eraserhead Under the Skin and Climax, I got my hands on a masterpiece horror, a full member that viscerally disturbs me. But now as for art house, I would compare it to films like Come and See. Reminded me of Silent Hill. Oh yeah, also Antichrist. This film is basically just the prequel to the creation of Antichrist. The first half of this movie as an exploration of divorce, the loss of love, and the growth of resentment is just a delirious descent into madness and awful, awful scenarios that Zulawski makes you experience. On my first watch, I found the second half to be a lot slower and kind of not really living up to that first half. I saw it as a 10 out of 10 movie inside of a bigger movie, but I've been revisiting it in pieces all across the month. And I've grown to appreciate that second half and how it's tackling all of this giant pile of themes that Zulaski just threw into the movie. All of these big ideas that can't possibly be explained or extricated in one movie, even at 2 hours. But yeah, this thing is a monster, and I'm giving it a 10 out of 10. Paprika is a 2006 film by the one and only Satoshi Kon. I had seen this years before, in a theater setting. And yeah, watching it again, I like it the same as I did back then, which is to say, spoilers, 8 out of 10. Even though there's a wonderment and grandiose accomplishment to it, it lacks a kind of momentum at its heart. The characters are simply rushed over in service to the creativity of animation. The romance is bizarrely weak to the point of satire for a director as good as Kon. And the villains have no understandable motivation, so they're just made into cartoon-level villains. But it is a Satoshi Kon film, and his use of sci-fi infused surrealism is still a spectacle to behold. The soundtrack is iconic and helps Paprika stand out more among his works. Tonally, the character designs are a whole tangent itself, as many scenes play out simply on the entertainment of watching these people move and act off of each other. If you've heard of Satoshi Kon from either Perfect Blue, Paranoia Agent, Tokyo Godfathers, Paprika is also spectacular, even if it's not his masterpiece. So yeah, I already said this, 8 out of 10. Code Lyoko. You might ask, critic, why did you watch 97 episodes of a show made for toddlers that aired 14 years ago? Well, if you were a snot-nosed kid catching Code Lyoko on Miguzi, Cartoon Network's fever dream of experimentation into squamous Lovecraftian horror, you must understand that some properties arise from your subconscious in such a way that there's a need to revisit it with your developed brain and seal the lid on it once and for all. And Code Lyoko is the kind of show that occupies a weird space in a child's mind. An anime-style, proto-internet age school drama made in France. You could argue there isn't really anything like it, for all things better or worse. It shot for an aesthetic of the future that did not pan out, leaving it and many 2000s era techno-age babble as cheesy curiosities. But also when I first jumped into the show, I'll admit there's a kind of glee in seeing such an earnest and optimistic aesthetic of kids and technology. Here are some lines delivered in the show.
Scanner, odd. Virtualization. Triangulate. I saw Yumi falling into the digital void. Virtualized forever?
It's so techno and cyber, dude. But there's a reason Lyoko would connect with kids in ways other American shows didn't. It shares anime's more age-ambiguous content, treating kids with a teenage-level maturity that makes them feel advanced. So the kids don't just go to school but live there, like college. And so the dynamic of the friend group is pretty unusual. It's almost adult in its structure. Also, can I just mention how these French kids are brutal as fuck? They're always roasting the shit out of each other. Even the friends bully each other every other episode. The makers of the show clearly had some fun with the cast of faculty sneaking in jokes and goings-on that adults would get. It actually captures realistically just the mood of adults having to take care of these Machiavellian shit kids. And if you notice the art style, how it's going between this cheap 2D 2000s anime and then 3D Pudge Fest. Like, these character designs are bad, but they're so bad they're iconic. And the show almost reaches this point of so bad it's great. It's like riding the line there. And also in anime's footsteps, questionable amounts of romantic/sexual subtext. American kids shows do not portray people this age as so acutely aware of looks and dating and
Sex appeal. Yeah, right, I'm sure of that.
But that's France. We must get some kind of a medal for watching this whole thing through, right? It's definitely way too bare to merit 4 seasons. And the writers very clearly had zero ideas on evolving any of the characters. In fact, one of the funniest arcs of the show is the de-evolution of characters like Odd, from a creepy weirdo to a canon creepy weirdo who lies, steals, and womanizes nonstop. I'm talking about this one. Of course, one hero did shine over the 4 seasons. Caddick Academy custodian Jim Morales, man of a mysterious, many-storied past. There was always something to laugh at, and because I wasn't watching this alone, we had fun creating our own interpretations of things. But yeah, it outstayed its welcome. I can't really recommend that any of you go out and watch this, but I had fun. Am I okay for saying that by the last episode, that cliche feeling of ending a show hit? Kinda. When you know you're saying your last goodbye to this world and cast of characters? You know, maybe we didn't have to watch the whole thing. This is fucking torture. Fuck it. Give it a 7 out of 10. The Venture Brothers. It's a long-running show from 2003 to 2018. I would describe this show as one part Rick and Morty, shitpost humor, and spontaneous appearance of absurd characters. One part Archer's espionage farce and self-aware jokes. Another part American Dad's militaristic government shenanigans. It's like a Team Fortress 2 extended universe show. Yeah, basically it's TF2, but with all the skins coming to life as new characters. It's more than just a Boomerang era cartoon parody. It has so much humor and accessibility. Though the more pop culture you know, the better. There are so many references to so many things. It's not perfect. It suffers from getting too comfortable with itself, even though the seasons are moving linearly and things are always a-changing. The excitement and novelty wear thin, like it's still funny and I'm hooked to it at this point, but when you start, you adore it. Then by season 5, you love it, you like it. However, vague spoilers alert, I really love the big change they made starting season 6, pretty much rebooting things in a new location. It really picked things back up, and the newer characters that are introduced feel fresh and invigorating to the show's dynamic. So now I too am sad that there is no season 8, and may never be, because it's definitely not complete. There's no illusion there. Like, the show ends, obviously cut short, on a cliffhanger that's just hilarious that that's what the show's ending with right now. Yeah, this is a really strong animated series, and I totally understand the cult following around it. If you've been a fan of Adult Swim's brand of content, I highly recommend The Venture Brothers. I'm not saying much more about the show because you just have to see it for yourself. The characters themselves are jokes, the plots are jokes, and I want it all to be a surprise for you guys. The heights of this show are like classic, but having seen it to completion, overall an 8 out of 10. Persona, Ingmar Bergman's 1966 psychological experimental masterpiece. This was a rewatch, so I'm not going to talk much about it, but yeah, it's still a perfect movie. How much you connect to it is variable, but it is a perfect, flawlessly crafted movie. So if it does hit you just right, this will be an unforgettable experience. This is the template for experimental, identity crises, dream logic films. Talking Mulholland Drive, Three Women, and many, many, many others. It's kind of its own genre at this point, and I've seen these successors before the actual film itself. And yet Persona is the cleanest cut of them. It really holds up. For a film made in 1966, the psychological content, experimental flourishes, and mystery feel fresh. So yeah, give Persona a shot. It's famous for a reason, and this one stands at a 10 out of 10. Next we got Pig, a 2021 film. It's good to be back in theaters and already watching something nice. I'd summarize Pig as an anti-revenge thriller, subverting it at every single turn by making the veteran soldier/super spy a chef. So there's a constant undercurrent of humor, and that is drawn out also by the casting of Nicolas Cage. He has a set of skills. He vanished from his line of work 10 years ago. He's been living in rustic solitude with nobody save for his darling pig. But he's forced back when they take his pig. All the beats are there, but instead of being solved with shooty punchy violence, he looks into people and uses humanity, integrity, and of course cooking to pass all obstacles. An ascending emotional weight that peaks in the third act for a long stretch, which had me holding my breath for what felt like a dangerous amount of time. The visuals aren't anything unique, and the music is okay. It kind of lends to that Portland vibe, but yeah, it doesn't really stray from the background or as a marker of genre beats, as they're getting subverted. And upon further thinking, it makes sense what this movie means to co-writer and director Michael Sarnowski. Because really the film is about a craft that at its heart is supposed to bring people together. provide warmth and joy and an appreciation of something in life. And like in this snooty Portland dining scene through which we travel, industry can take all that away for competitiveness, pretentiousness, and a pervasive cynicism that can trap people and wear down that genuine passion, whatever their craft may be. And so by subverting a blockbuster genre, Pig replaces the escapist fantasy of violence and revenge with an appeal to believe in yourself and your dream, and your ability to heal with constructive action. So in a strange way, Pig managed to be a very American film. And I don't think I need to go into how this could parallel with the film industry. This is the director's first commercial release, and already it's getting all of this attention and critical praise, so let this be a triumph for indie. It's a really good film, another slam dunk from my boy Nicolas Cage. Go see it. It's an 8 out of 10 for me. Kuroneko 1968 by Kaneto Shindo. This is a rewatch. So again, let's rush through this. On this time around, what struck me was the ambitiousness. I mean, it's throwing a lot of different genres and stories together. It's thematically developed further than his other horror film, Onibaba, but formally a lot messier. There's a satirically critical representation of samurai legend. There's Kwaidan horror, a family drama, a heartbreaking tragedy, a campy, spooky supernatural film, all blended together into this product. It's constantly shifting modes across its runtime, even as the imagery operates on a cyclical repetitiveness, a feast of Japanese history and culture due to its hodgepodge of elements, with still breathtaking black and white cinematography, creating a ghostly aura evocative of oral tradition via the hard lighting and substantial negative space. A kind of oddity you can only seem to get from Japan. Kuroneko is a fun, if restrained film worth watching, even if all its parts don't add up to their ambition. And so Kuroneko stands at 7 out of 10. Alright, White Rock. So I got in the Olympic Films collection, the Olympics are going on, and what better way to celebrate it than seeing that one-of-a-kind worldwide spirit presented by great filmmakers. White Rock is a 1977 film covering the 76 Winter Olympics, and you will know it's a 70s film. It has got that photographic 70s film look, with images right out of a ski resort brochure brought to you by Fuji Color. But if there's any top bill in this production, it's gotta be the highly synthesized soundtrack, which really lends a sort of mystical air to these proceedings, even if they're on the surface just sporty. It really takes in the majestic beauty of the White Rock, the mountains, the snowy landscapes, the village that they take place in. And I have a real soft spot for these kinds of places, so I was all for it. Then you got that wintry landscape and the bright, solid colors of the winter sportswear, the outfits, the national flags. Yes, please. And some great shots of the action. I'd call some moments in this Kubrickian. I know it's not technically accurate to say, but it reminds me that part of what made Kubrick so good is that he took inspiration from outside movies, like in sports and sciences, and that's what kind of gives some of his films that crisp, documentary-like feeling that adds an oomph to the work. And you can see that here in this kind of semi-abstract representation of the Winter Olympics. With their helmets and winter gear, it is almost space-agey, like a lot of things in the 70s and 80s just tended to be. But yeah, this was a pretty entertaining work. I'm no Olympics fanatic, so I'll take from this what I can. Oh yeah, and there's a weird celebrity cameo. I almost forgot by, God, who's this guy? James Coburn guides us through the Olympics, basically participating in some mock runs and narrating about the events and giving us context and all of that, all the while serenading us with his new Hollywood tough guy Rat Pack kind of charm. It's kind of light and goofy in a calming sort of way, but I'm giving it a solid 7 out of 10. Nosferatu the Vampire, the 1979 adaptation. Reboot, reinterpretation, or a new original, whatever, somewhere between them, by Herr Werner Herzog. So yeah, this film is a mood piece, really. Its strength isn't in just blood and vicious vampire attacks. It's a kind of film that I really love, but in a hard to explain way, it just sort of builds this quiet intensity within you if you let it, if you engage with it, because it is a slow-paced, meditative take on the vampire. It's more interested in time, our mortal passing through it, and German art and history, wrapped in all of that romantic, gothic horror grotesquerie in a way that shows a true admiration and appreciation for it. I mean, it kind of takes me back to when I was little and digging the horror of English class. You know, Edgar Allan Poe and Frankenstein. And just that feeling it gives you when you first expose yourself to that kind of particular mood. And yeah, Herzog, again, when he chooses to portray a subject or explore it, you know, this guy is insane. He'll reach the furthest reaches to meet that. And he doesn't have to do anything as crazy as Fitzcarraldo or Aguirre here, but it's another fantastic dive into his subject. Hello, Isabelle Adjani. I cannot see you the same after Possession. But here, Klaus Kinski is again the real superstar. He plays Nosferatu like just the creepiest thing you've ever seen. He cranks the creep up to 11 and never turns that off. So yeah, I do recommend this. Stands at a 9 out of 10. And closing things off, the last film that I watched fully is Visions of 8. 1973 film of the Olympics. They got 8 renowned filmmakers from around the world and let them loose on the 1972 Olympics, with the hope that filtered through their lens, they might get something unique and fascinating. They received carte blanche, with the one guideline being to follow on one theme. It was alright. For an Olympic film highlighted by Criterion with its own release, I did expect more. Some directors were way more interesting than others. The world of the Olympics circa 1973 is so interesting in itself. Just seeing the technology and the vintage aesthetics is a treat, and part of why my Zitterling segment was one of the more interesting ones, just by exploring the scale of production surrounding the actual sporting events. It also focuses on this hyper-masculine world of professional weightlifting. Another highlight came from Arthur Penn, whose abstract cinematic form of the pole vaulting works much like Leni Riefenstahl's famous Olympia, the Nazi party-sponsored depiction of the Olympics, but you know, without the propaganda. And the final segment, John Schlesinger's Portrait of a Marathon Runner, which keeps in the added context of a political massacre of Israeli athletes that occurred. Very mixed experience. It is very capable, but of these 8 visions, honestly, some of them overlap. So you feel a bit gypped being advertised Visions of 8 when it adds up to maybe like Visions of 5.5. With all that said, I'm gonna give Visions of 8 a 6 out of 10. Well, guess it's time to hit the old dusty trail. That's all I got for you this month. Those 2 TV shows there, yeah, that took up a lot of time, so I know we don't have too many properties to talk about, but I was not idling away. I was watching the hell out of some stuff here. And don't forget, I love you.
Will the real Madam Einstein please stand up? Oh wait, that's me, and before you say anything else, it's mine, so get your hands off of my boy. You toy, but the supercomputer isn't a toy for you to play with the concept of time. And just to make it clear, I'll say it in rhyme.